It's going down.
It's going to go down. We're in the building. So the Gruden era in Oakland is off to a bit of a shaky start, right?
You're batting 1,000.
I'm batting 1,000. I'm perfect. They haven't reached a deal with two-time All-Pro defensive end Khalil Mack, and some are speculating he might be on the trading block. According to one betting site, the Packers, not the Raiders, are the team Mack will most likely be playing for by the trade deadline. All right, Chris Kenny, how surprised are you that it might not be a return of the Mack in Oakland?
I see what you did.
No, you're down 500.
Very. I see what you did there.
Just stay right there. You're still in the Hall of Fame. Stay right there.
The corny is about right here, right there.
I was very excited about that one.
No, but I'm really surprised that the Raiders are thinking about making this move. It just, from a football standpoint, doesn't make any sense. I mean, you took the guy in the 2014 NFL draft in the top 5. If you draft an edge player in the top 5, you hope.
Where did he go to school?
Buffalo.
Yeah,
Buffalo.
I mean, it's not like he's from Football Factory, so this small school produced a big-time player, never had ever done that, and he developed into
best case scenario.
He's an all-pro edge player. I mean, he made the all-pro team as a defensive end and an outside linebacker. Yeah. So whether you want to put his hand in the dirt or whether you want to stand him up, he can get after the quarterback. He is a game changer. So the fact that you took him there and you actually hit on that pick, and now when it comes time to work out a contract extension, you're thinking about paying him, it just doesn't make any sense.
Why?
He's got double the amount of sacks as the first pick in that draft, Jadeveon Clowney. So, I mean, it's mind-boggling now.
Wow.
I know that.
And I know Houston feels a lot better about Clowney than they do. Wow,
But here's my thing, and I heard that there are some moving parts with this Oakland Raiders situation because the organization is in a little bit of flux. They got the relocation to Las Vegas. They've got to pay relocation fees. Then they got the contract extensions they worked out with Derek Carr and Gabe Jackson. So
they gave their head coach $100 million.
Exactly. So, I mean, when you start talking about the guarantees that are going to be in Khalil Mack's contract, it's going to be over what Von Miller got for practical guarantees. He got $70 million in practical guarantees. So whatever Khalil Mack does, it's going to eclipse that. And people are saying, and Paul Gutierrez, beat writer for the Oakland Raiders, he does a great job. He was suggesting that situation in and of itself might make it the reason why the Raiders have to move on from Khalil Mack. I just don't think from an X's and O's standpoint, you can't afford to do this. You got to figure out how to make it work.
This is insanity. I mean, the whole point of drafting in the top 10 is to hope you get a guy almost as good as Khalil Mack. You said earlier, in this league, take quarterbacks out of it. Who are the most important guys? It's either pass rusher, shutdown corner. I can make the argument that if you remove quarterbacks, this is the most impactful player in the whole league. I'm not saying it's definitive, but he's on the short list. He's on the short list with Antonio, with Jalen Ramsey, with Joey Bosa. Like, that is the type of player that he is. His second year in the league, he won, or 2 years ago, his third year in the league, pardon me, he won Defensive Player of the Year. I don't get this. And when I don't typically like to make too big of a deal about the gambling sites and but right now, if you think he's going to be on the Raiders, you can get $4 for every dollar you bet. They say there's only a 25% chance he stays on the Raiders. Like, what are you doing? I don't especially when you look at the rest of their team. They brought in Jordy Nelson because they think they can compete right now. They have Derek Carr. They think they can compete right now. Their biggest weakness is defense. Aside from Khalil Mack, who on that defense is a guy you look at and say, oh, he's a sure thing. Not nobody. I don't understand this. This is if they are treating it as if Khalil Mack, you got all these off the field issues. You don't know if he's going to be suspended. You don't know if he's going to be arrested. He's played in 64 of 64 games, highly productive. I don't understand what's going on.
Well, the only logical explanation is the money, and this is a cash-poor organization. Nick, you pointed out as far as the ownership and their lack of cash flow that they're going to struggle with potentially until they get that new stadium built there in Las Vegas. But my concern is the same concern when the Rams decided they were going to leave St. Louis and go into the market of Los Angeles. The Raiders are leaving Oakland and going to Vegas. How are they going to sell that football team? Because they do have a quarterback, but he is not one of the marquee names. Khalil Mack is a bigger name around the NFL and a drawing card than their quarterback. Amari Cooper is not a drawing card. So when you're trying to sell this to the people of Vegas, as far as what are your entertainment options, you need that guy with that helmet, with that logo, you need guys like him to be able to do that. And how serious is John Gruden about winning a championship? Or is it just that he doesn't even have the option? Because this leads me to believe this is the reason why John Gruden hadn't talked to him, because they didn't plan on signing him. They realized early on they couldn't afford it. The numbers and guarantees around heard through their general manager that we're not going to be able to sign him. So there's no need for you to have a relationship. That's not fair to put on John at this stage.
No, it's not. It's not on John Gruden. This is on ownership in the front office. They've got to figure out how to make it work. I just think when you take an edge player with that type of draft capital and he pans out, you do whatever it takes to try to keep this guy around. You get creative. You find a way to make it work. But clearly the Raiders organization, they're going to move in a different direction. And from what it sounds like right now, they're seriously considering offers from other teams about trading the former defensive player of the year.
The worst thing they should do is the least thing they should do is just franchise and just sign him to a one-year deal, because you don't have the cash outlay. You know
but then he's on his fifth-year option. He won't show up. That's the problem. The problem is that they're a year away from being able to franchise him. Like, he's on the fifth-year option. It's the same draft class as Odell. Like, as we've seen Aaron Donald, this amazing draft class. And so the teams. Yeah,
what I'm trying to say is, if they don't want to sign him long term, what is the downside to not the big cash outlay? What's wrong with that right there?
I just think he's not going to show up. I think his stance is I'll sit out the 9 games, or 10 games until the season, the maximum allowable games till seasonal toll, and then see what happens.
His representation is not going to let him sign anything less than a market value deal. Joel Siegel, his agent, he's going to eclipse what Von Miller got. It's going to be in the ballpark of $80 million in guaranteed money, close to $20 million on AAV.
So let's talk about the team that is out there as one of the potential buyers, basically, for getting a Khalil Mack, and that's the Packers. How much better does Khalil Mack make the Green Bay Packers?
Well, I think that Green Bay Packers are a serious contender even without Khalil Mack. So adding him to that defense, I think, takes them to a whole nother level. You look at the production from Clay Matthews, it hasn't been the same. He hadn't had double-digit sacks since 2014. He's in the contract year. So they're looking for another edge player. You got to figure that they got about 3 or 4 more prime years for Aaron Rodgers to be playing at an all-pro level. So it just makes sense if you're Green Bay to try to make that move. Also consider the compensation that it would take to get somebody like Khalil Mack. The Green Bay Packers have 2 first-round draft picks in 2019 as a result of the New Orleans Saints deal, where they traded back and the Saints moved up to get Marcus Davenport. So it makes sense if you're going to try to make a move for Khalil Mack. Right. The Green Bay Packers, Reggie McKenzie came out of that front office, so there's a relationship there. So and they'll have the cap space to be able to sign him. So whatever happens with Khalil Mack, whatever team trades for him, a part of working out that trade is working out the contract extension for Khalil Mack. They've got to have a deal in place and know, because of the compensation that they're giving up, that they're going to have that guy around for longer than just one season.
And because the Packers are publicly owned, you can read about how much money they have. It's been well documented. Yeah. Man, they're making money. They're printing money in Green Bay with the stadium, everything they have. So it's strange. The Oakland Raiders, they can't afford the marquee players, but the only team that we have that's publicly owned, they can afford them.
If the Packers were to add Khalil Mack, he would be the best defensive player that's been on Aaron Rodgers' team since Charles Woodson, the year Woodson won Defensive Player of the Year.
He would be the best Packers player since the great Reggie White, who changed that culture and led them to a Super Bowl.
Right. When they've had a true star defensive player to go along with either Favre or Rodgers, they won Super Bowl.
Yeah. They even look at Julius Pepper when he came over. He gave that defense a huge boost.
And so it would be for a team that's already, because of Rodgers, on the short list of Super Bowl favorites, it changes the math for everybody, because he's the best front 7 guy they would have had since Reggie White.
All right, Chris Kenny, stick around. Coming up, which Hall of Fame running back is Zeke trying to mimic next season? That's next on First Things First. His birthday is